Tonight, we peel back the heavy curtain on a sports tragedy so profound that the establishment tried to bury it for nearly a decade. Imagine a player who possessed the gravity-defying leap of Michael Jordan and the massive ball-palming hands of a giant, yet his name was scrubbed from the official record books during his absolute physical prime. We are talking about Connie Hawkins, the man often called the blueprint for the modern superstar, a talent so immense that he was legendary before he ever stepped onto a professional court. In various interviews throughout the 1970s, the iconic coach Larry Brown stated with absolute conviction that Connie Hawkins was the finest individual player he had ever laid eyes on, a claim that sounds like hyperbole until you realize who else was playing at that time. According to archives from the legendary Rucker Park Streetball League in the early 1960s, Connie Hawkins was routinely outplaying established professionals while still just a teenager, humiliating some of the greatest defenders of that era on the sun-baked concrete of New York City. Despite this undeniable brilliance, the doors to the big leagues were slammed shut and locked from the inside, leaving the basketball world to wonder what might have been. Court documents from later investigations would eventually hint at a conspiracy of silence that kept this generational talent in a state of professional exile for 8 agonizing years. Why was the greatest athlete of his generation forced to play for peanuts on the street while others signed million-dollar deals? According to investigative reports and memoirs from that period, the answers were hidden deep within the Federal Bureau of Investigation files from 1961, and they involved a web of suspicion that would change the trajectory of sports history forever. To understand the heights Connie Hawkins reached, you first have to look at the shadows of the Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood where he grew up. In the late 1950s, the streets of Brooklyn were an unforgiving proving ground, but for a young man with wings, they were a kingdom. By 1959, local newspapers were already buzzing with headlines about a high school phenomenon at Madison High who was doing things with a basketball that seemed to defy the laws of physics. According to official high school scouting reports from that season, Connie Hawkins was averaging an incredible 25 points and over 20 rebounds per game, statistics that made him the most coveted recruit in the entire nation. He was a quiet, unassuming kid who found his voice through the rhythmic thumping of the ball on the pavement, unaware that his every move was being watched by more than just college scouts. In various retrospective articles by major sports media outlets, his peers from the 1950s described a boy who could jump so high he could practically look down into the rim, a physical gift that seemed almost unfair. He was the golden ticket out of poverty for his family, a shining light in a neighborhood that rarely saw such promise. However, as he prepared to take his talents to the University of Iowa, a hidden danger was already closing in on the young star. The excitement of a full scholarship and a path to the professional ranks masked a terrifying reality that would soon come to light. According to later memoirs, when Connie Hawkins boarded that plane for Iowa, he unknowingly carried a figurative target on his back that had been placed there by the very system he hoped to join. The tragedy of Connie Hawkins did not begin with a missed shot or a blown knee, but with a handshake in a dark corner of a New York restaurant. Enter Jack Molinas, a disgraced former professional player who had become a master manipulator in the world of illegal sports wagering. According to formal court transcripts from the New York State corruption probe in March of 1961, Molinas was actively hunting for vulnerable college athletes who could be used as pawns in his elaborate schemes. Connie Hawkins, a naive freshman far from home and struggling with the meager resources allowed to student athletes at the time, became a target of this predatory figure. In the official materials of the subsequent criminal trial, it was documented that Hawkins accepted a small loan of approximately $200 from Molinas, a sum that was presented as a simple act of kindness between basketball players. To a kid who had nothing, $200 felt like a fortune, but in the eyes of the law, it was the first link in a chain of corruption. Investigative reports from that era noted that there was never any evidence that Connie Hawkins actually influenced the outcome of a single game. Yet the mere association with a known gambler was enough to trigger a firestorm. By the time the authorities began their raids in early 1961, the trap had already snapped shut around the unsuspecting teenager. The question that still lingers in the minds of historians is why the university and the league were so quick to discard him over a debt that amounted to less than a week's wages for a regular worker. As the police sirens began to wail outside the dormitories, the life Connie Hawkins had imagined for himself started to crumble before it had even truly begun. The interrogation rooms of the early 1960s were not places for the faint of heart, especially for a 19-year-old kid from the streets of Brooklyn who had never seen the inside of a precinct. According to personal accounts found in various interviews with Esquire magazine, Connie Hawkins was subjected to grueling 13-hour interrogation sessions where he was denied food and basic legal counsel. Detectives and federal agents leaned over him, trying to squeeze out a confession that would link him to a massive point-shaving scandal that was rocking the very foundation of collegiate athletics. The pressure was psychological, intense, and relentless, designed to make a young man feel like his entire world was about to vanish. In his own memoirs, Connie Hawkins described the sheer terror of being trapped in that room, being told that if he just signed a statement, he could go back to his life. However, that statement was a trap, a document that would haunt him for the rest of his professional career. By the time the dust settled in May of 1961, the University of Iowa released an official statement confirming the permanent dismissal of their star player, effectively ending his college education before it had truly begun. This was not just a suspension, it was a total erasure of his status as a student athlete. The young man who was supposed to be the savior of the program was suddenly a persona non grata, cast out into the cold without a single shred of physical evidence proving he had ever manipulated a game. But as devastating as the expulsion was, the real nightmare was just beginning in the smoke-filled boardrooms of the professional league. In the hushed corridors of the major league offices, an invisible wall was being built around Connie Hawkins, one that no amount of talent could hope to scale. Commissioner Walter Kennedy, a man known for his rigid stance on the public image of the sport, was determined to keep the league clean at any cost, even if it meant sacrificing an innocent man. According to internal memos from the commissioner's office that surfaced years later, there was a coordinated effort to ensure that no team would even consider signing the young phenom. When the 1964 NBA draft results were published, the name of the greatest basketball talent in the country was nowhere to be found, a glaring omission that sent a clear message to the entire sporting world. The blackball was in full effect, a secret agreement among owners to treat Connie Hawkins like a ghost who didn't exist. Investigative reports from that era suggest that several coaches were desperate to bring his skills to their rosters, but they were met with stern warnings from the league's top brass. The young star was being punished for a crime he hadn't committed, forced to watch from the sidelines as players with half his ability signed lucrative contracts and enjoyed the spotlight. It was a professional exile that felt like a life sentence, leaving a generational talent to wonder if he would ever be allowed to compete on the world's biggest stage. Just as it seemed his career would vanish into the asphalt of New York's parks, a group of bold entrepreneurs decided to challenge the status quo, offering a glimmer of hope in a new, renegade league. While the Major League kept its doors bolted, the short-lived American Basketball League saw an opportunity to capitalize on the man the establishment had rejected. In 1961, the Pittsburgh Wrens stepped forward with a contract for Connie Hawkins worth $7,500, a modest sum by modern standards, but a lifeline for a man who had been cast into the wilderness. It was here, in the cold gyms of the ABL, that the world finally got a glimpse of the Hawk in flight, and the results were nothing short of terrifying for his opponents. According to official league statistical summaries from the 1961 to 1962 season, Connie Hawkins dominated the competition so thoroughly that he was named the league's most valuable player at just 19 years of age. He was a man among boys, showcasing a style of play that combined power, grace, and an aerial game that anticipated the highlights of the future. Journalists covering those games wrote about a player who seemed to belong to a different species, a talent that was clearly destined for greatness if only the powers that be would allow it. Despite his individual brilliance and the MVP trophy on his shelf, the ABL was financially unstable and began to crumble under the weight of its own ambitions. According to financial reports from that period, the league folded shortly after its second season, leaving Connie Hawkins once again without a professional home and facing an uncertain future. But just as the darkness seemed to close in again, he received an offer that would take him away from the competitive grind and into the world of global showmanship with a team of traveling entertainers. For 4 long years, the man who should have been the king of the professional courts was forced to travel the globe as a member of the world-famous Harlem Globetrotters. Between 1963 and 1967, Connie Hawkins lived a life that was part athletic brilliance and part choreographed entertainment. While the flashy red, white, and blue ball spun on his fingertips to the sound of Sweet Georgia Brown, the internal fire of a true competitor was being slowly extinguished. According to internal team logs from that era, the Globetrotters maintained a grueling schedule that often exceeded 200 games per year, zigzagging across continents to perform for crowds that viewed them as a comedy act rather than a basketball powerhouse. In various ledger entries and payment receipts from the mid-60s, it was documented that despite being the biggest draw on the roster, Connie Hawkins was earning a fraction of what a typical superstar in the established leagues would have commanded. He was trapped in a golden cage, entertaining fans while his elite physical prime was being spent on buses and in cramped locker rooms. Reporters who followed the team noted a growing sense of melancholy in the young star, a feeling that he was becoming a caricature of the athlete he was meant to be. According to personal accounts from his teammates, he would often sit in silence after a show, staring at his hands and wondering if the world would ever see him play a meaningful game again. However, every summer he returned to the one place where the lights were dim, but the truth was undeniable, a place where no commissioner could tell him he didn't belong. When the sun went down over the concrete jungles of New York City, the Rucker Park Summer League became the only stage where Connie Hawkins could truly be himself. In the mid-60s, these legendary asphalt courts were the site of secret battles that would have put any televised championship to shame. It was here that the Hawk faced off against the greatest icons of the era, including Wilt Chamberlain and a young Lou Alcindor, the man who would later become Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. According to the meticulous descriptions in David Wolf's investigative book titled Foul, Connie Hawkins was not just competing with these titans, he was dominating them. On those humid summer nights, witnesses described a man who could take flight from the free throw line and finish with a thunderous dunk over 7-foot defenders, proving that his talent had not diminished during his professional exile. One specific report from a 1965 exhibition match detailed a moment where Connie Hawkins soared over the league's most feared shot blockers, a feat that left the crowd in a stunned silence before the park erupted in a frenzy. These were the years when the legend of the Proto-Jordan was truly born, whispered about in barbershops and on street corners as the greatest player the world was being forbidden from seeing. According to sports journalists of the time, the sheer dominance he displayed on the street was a silent protest against the system that had blacklisted him. This underground validation gave Connie Hawkins the courage to stop running and start fighting back against the giants of the corporate office. In 1966, the soft-spoken kid from Brooklyn decided to do the unthinkable. He declared war on the most powerful organization in professional sports. With the help of 2 determined lawyers known as the Lipman brothers, Connie Hawkins filed a massive antitrust lawsuit against the Major League, seeking $6 million in damages for the illegal destruction of his career. The legal filings alleged that the league had conspired to prevent him from earning a living based on nothing more than rumors and unsubstantiated suspicion. According to court documents from the initial proceedings, the defense for the league tried to portray Connie Hawkins as a threat to the integrity of the game, relying on the same old stories from his freshman year in college. However, as the case moved forward, it became clear that the establishment had a serious problem. They didn't have a single piece of hard evidence to prove that he had ever done anything wrong. In the deposition transcripts from that period, high-ranking officials were forced to admit that no formal investigation had ever been conducted before the blackball was enforced. The $6 million figure was not just a number, it was a statement of his worth and a direct challenge to the arrogance of the front offices. As the legal battle began to drain the league's resources and threaten their public image, the tension in the boardrooms reached a breaking point. The question was no longer whether Connie Hawkins was innocent, but how much the league was willing to pay to make their mistake go away. While the established league kept its doors locked tight, a new, colorful rival was rising to challenge the monopoly on professional basketball. In 1967, the American Basketball Association, or the ABA, burst onto the scene with its signature red, white, and blue ball and a faster, more high-flying style of play. This was the moment the Hawk had been waiting for, a chance to prove his worth in a league that didn't care about the whispers of the past. The Pittsburgh Pipers made a bold move and signed Connie Hawkins, finally giving him a stage where his statistics would actually count for something. According to the official league statistical archives from that inaugural 1967 to 1968 season, Connie Hawkins didn't just play. He incinerated the competition. He averaged an incredible 26.8 points and nearly 14 rebounds per game, a performance that earned him the league's very first Most Valuable Player trophy. But the real drama unfolded in the postseason, where he led his team to a grueling 7-game series victory to claim the first-ever ABA championship. According to game logs from that final series in May of 1968, Connie Hawkins played through excruciating pain to secure the title, proving he was a winner at the highest level. Yet, as he hoisted the trophy, a darker reality was beginning to set in. The years of playing on the unforgiving asphalt of New York had taken a silent, devastating toll on his body. Investigative reports from team trainers at the time noted that his knees were already showing signs of advanced wear and tear, a physical debt that would soon come due. By the end of the 1960s, the legal pressure and the undeniable success of Connie Hawkins in the rival league became too much for the major establishment to ignore. The $6 million lawsuit was moving toward a trial that threatened to expose the inner workings of the league's blacklisting practices, and the front office was starting to panic. In a stunning reversal that shocked the sports world, the league finally waved the white flag in May of 1969. According to the official press release from the commissioner's office, the ban on Connie Hawkins was formally lifted, and he was cleared to join the big leagues. But this wasn't just a simple apology. It was a massive financial settlement designed to make the problem disappear forever. Court-approved documents from the settlement reveal that Connie Hawkins was awarded a compensation package totaling approximately $1,300,000, a staggering sum for that era. This payout was a quiet admission of guilt, a literal price tag placed on the 8 years of his life that had been stolen by the system. However, the victory was bittersweet for the man who had spent his absolute physical prime in exile. He was now 27 years old, an age when most players are reaching their peak, but Connie Hawkins was entering the league with the body of a much older man. According to medical evaluations conducted during his transition, doctors were shocked by the condition of his joints, raising the haunting question of how much greatness he had left in the tank. The world was finally going to see the legend in the sunlight, but some wondered if they were only getting the remains of what could have been. When Connie Hawkins finally suited up for the Phoenix Suns in the 1969-1970 season, the atmosphere in the 70 season, the atmosphere in the arena was electric, with a mix of anticipation and skepticism. Many wondered if the legend of the streets could actually survive the nightly grind of the world's premier basketball league. Within weeks, the Hawk provided an answer that silenced every critic in the building. According to official league records from his debut season, Connie Hawkins averaged 24.6 points and over 10 rebounds per game, numbers that immediately placed him among the elite of the sport. He was a revelation, a player who could glide through the air with a grace that seemed impossible for a man of his size. By the end of that year, he had achieved something truly historic. He was voted onto the All-NBA First Team and finished in the top 5 of the most valuable player voting. In various newspaper archives from that season, journalists described his play as poetry in motion, a style that many today recognize as the direct ancestor to the modern aerial game. He was finally a superstar on the biggest stage, earning the accolades and the fame that had been denied to him for nearly a decade. But even as he enjoyed this long overdue success, the shadows of the past refused to fully retreat. According to reports from the era, the league's security department still kept a close eye on his associates, and the yellow press continued to dig into his old connections. The triumph was real, but so was the feeling that he was playing on borrowed time. Just as he reached the summit, the physical price of his journey was about to become an obstacle he couldn't jump over. By the time the early 1970s rolled around, the high-flying spectacle that had captivated the fans in Phoenix began to show signs of a tragic decline. Behind the highlight reel dunks and the effortless grace was a grim reality documented in the medical files of the Phoenix Suns organization. According to training staff reports and medical evaluations from the 1971 to 1972 season, the cartilage in the knees of Connie Hawkins was essentially non-existent. This was the brutal physical tax for a decade spent jumping on the unforgiving, rock-hard pavement of the New York City parks. The lost years of his career had not just cost him millions in potential earnings. They had stolen the very foundation of his athletic prowess. In various investigative articles published in major sports magazines during the 1970s, his teammates noted that Connie Hawkins was forced to completely reinvent his style of play. He moved away from the gravity-defying leaps of his youth toward a more grounded, cerebral approach to the game. He became a master of one-handed ball control, using his massive, legendary palms to fake out defenders in a way that no one in the professional league had ever witnessed before. In the locker rooms of that era, he was frequently seen with his knees heavily wrapped in massive bags of ice for hours after every single game, a silent testament to the agony he endured just to remain competitive on the hardwood. According to the official season statistics from 1972 to 1973, his scoring average began a steady and undeniable decline, dropping from over 21 points per game down to approximately 16 points. It was a heartbreaking transformation for the fans who knew what he was truly capable of in his prime. The question among the team staff was no longer how high he could soar, but how many minutes his body could survive before the pain became truly unbearable. He was a genius playing with broken tools, a man who had been denied his true peak and was now forced to manage the wreckage of a once perfect physique. In October of 1973, the basketball world was rocked by a blockbuster trade that sent Connie Hawkins from the desert heat of Arizona to the glamour and bright lights of the Los Angeles Lakers. The deal, which involved the player Keith Erickson and a significant, though undisclosed, sum of cash, was seen as a bold gamble by the Lakers management to bolster a roster already filled with legendary icons. For Connie Hawkins, this move was the ultimate validation, a chance to transition from a smaller market to the undisputed media capital of the world. However, the transition to the purple and gold was far from the smooth ride he had hoped for. According to the official Lakers box scores from the 1973 to 1974 season, his physical limitations were becoming impossible to ignore even for the most devoted fans. His scoring average fell to a career low of 12.6 points per game, a staggering drop for a man who had once dominated every court he stepped on. The local media in Los Angeles was notoriously aggressive, and various columnists began to openly question if the Lakers had traded for a superstar or merely the lingering ghost of one. Despite the statistical drop, the magnetism of Connie Hawkins remained a powerful force in the city. He was a constant fixture in the Hollywood social scene, frequently seen at the most exclusive events and clubs. However, according to reports in the Los Angeles Times from that period, there was a growing and palpable friction between the veteran player and the coaching staff regarding his role in the offense and his defensive effort. The Hawk was used to being the undisputed center of the universe, but in a locker room full of massive egos and championship expectations, he was often relegated to a supporting role that he found difficult to accept. As the season progressed, the tension within the organization only intensified, serving as a precursor to the deeper, more personal struggles that were beginning to surface away from the eyes of the public. Beyond the bright lights of the arena and the roar of the massive audience, the life of Connie Hawkins in the mid-70s was a complex tapestry of public fame and profound personal isolation. According to a deeply investigative feature published in Sports Illustrated during that era, there was a pervasive sense of melancholy that seemed to follow him through every locker room and hotel. The man who was once the undisputed king of the streets was now a veteran navigating a professional league that still didn't quite trust his character. The yellow journalism of the time frequently focused on his lifestyle off the court, often hinting at associations and choices that the league officials found highly problematic. In various memoirs written by his contemporaries and teammates, Connie Hawkins was described as a man who carried an invisible, heavy weight, a deep-seated sadness that came from the knowledge that his absolute best years had been stolen from him. He was often seen sitting alone in the back of the team bus during long road trips, lost in thought, according to accounts from the players who shared those journeys with him. According to internal team memos from the Lakers front office during 1974 and 1975, there were repeated and serious discussions about whether his lifestyle and focus aligned with the culture of the organization. He was a free spirit who had spent his most formative years playing by his own rules on the asphalt, and the rigid corporate structure of the professional league often felt like a new and suffocating kind of prison. The media began to speculate that his heart was no longer fully in the game, pointing to his fluctuating performance and frequent injuries as evidence of a man who was mentally ready to walk away. By the middle of 1975, the whispers in the front offices were becoming deafening. The time of the Hawk in Los Angeles was rapidly approaching its final act. By the middle of 1975, the once mighty Hawk found himself in the twilight of a career that had been more of a battleground than a sporting journey. The Los Angeles Lakers, sensing that his physical engine was finally running out of fuel, decided to move on, leading Connie Hawkins to his final destination in the professional league, the Atlanta Hawks. According to the official transaction logs from the 1975 to 1976 season, this move was seen as a way for a young, rebuilding team to add a legendary veteran presence to their roster. In the humid arenas of the South, Connie Hawkins took on a new and unexpected role as a mentor to the next generation of players, sharing the hard-earned wisdom of a man who had seen the absolute best and worst of the industry. However, the physical reality remained a relentless adversary. According to team medical reports from that final season, he was often limited to short bursts of play, his legendary mobility almost entirely gone. In April of 1976, Connie Hawkins stepped onto the hardwood for his final game in the professional ranks, a moment that marked the end of a 15-year saga of brilliance and betrayal. According to the final career statistics compiled by the league researchers, he retired with over 11,000 points and 5,000 rebounds, staggering numbers considering he was robbed of his most productive years. Sports writers of the time noted that while he walked away quietly, the sheer weight of his absence from the 1961 to 1969 seasons remained a massive, unspoken scandal in the front offices of the sport. He was leaving the game with his head held high, but the question of what he could have achieved if the system hadn't conspired against him continued to haunt the collective conscience of the basketball world. The end of the playing days for Connie Hawkins did not mean the end of the psychological burden he carried from his years of professional exile. For nearly a decade, he had been treated like a criminal by the very organization he eventually helped to make successful, and that kind of trauma doesn't simply vanish with a retirement ceremony. According to various deeply personal interviews conducted throughout the 1980s, Connie Hawkins often spoke about the feeling of being watched or judged even years after he had been formally exonerated. He described a pervasive sense of distrust toward authority figures, a direct result of the 13-hour interrogations and the betrayal by his own university in 1961. In a particularly moving feature article published in a major sports magazine in the mid-80s, he admitted that he felt the league had assassinated his dream during his early 20s, leaving him to wonder about his true potential for the rest of his life. Despite these inner struggles, he remained a beloved figure in the community, eventually serving as a goodwill ambassador for the Phoenix Suns organization for many years. According to records from the Suns community outreach programs, he dedicated thousands of hours to working with underprivileged youth, using his own story as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unfair judgment and the importance of resilience. Yet, investigative reports from those who knew him best suggested that he remained a deeply private and sometimes melancholic man, still processing the immense loss of his stolen peak. The league that had once turned its back on him was now using his image to sell tickets, a paradox that he navigated with a quiet, weary dignity. In May of 1992, the ultimate validation finally arrived for the man who had been cast out into the wilderness for so long. Connie Hawkins was officially inducted into the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame, a moment that served as a formal apology from the entire sporting establishment. According to the official program from the ceremony in Springfield, Massachusetts, the induction was a recognition not just of his statistics, but of his profound and lasting influence on the way the game was played. Legendary figures like Magic Johnson and Julius Doctor. Jay Irving attended the event, with many of them stating on the record that Connie Hawkins was the true pioneer of the above-the-rim style that they had later perfected. In his emotional acceptance speech, he didn't focus on the bitterness of the past, but on the gratitude he felt for finally being seen for who he truly was, a great basketball player and nothing less. According to archival footage of the event, there wasn't a dry eye in the house as the Hawk finally took his rightful place among the immortals of the sport. This was the moment the black ball was permanently shattered, replaced by a bronze plaque and a permanent spot in history. However, as the celebrations concluded, the historical data remained clear. The 8 years of his prime were still gone, and no amount of trophies could return the physical gifts that had been wasted on the asphalt of New York. The induction was a triumph of the spirit, but it was also a reminder of the fragility of a career when it stands in the path of a powerful and unforgiving system. He had won the war, but the scars he carried into that Hall of Fame were a testament to a journey that no athlete should ever have to endure again. When we look at the high-flying highlights of the modern era, we often forget that the DNA of the aerial game was actually written on the streets of New York by a man the system tried to erase. Long before Michael Jordan became a global icon for his ability to hang in the air, Connie Hawkins was already performing those same gravity-defying feats in front of stunned crowds. According to various video archives of the 1968 American Basketball Association highlights, the Hawk was the first to consistently utilize the tomahawk dunk and the massive sweeping finger roll that would later define the superstars of the 1980s and 90s. His physical prototype was decades ahead of its time, combining a 6'9" frame with the ball-handling skills of a much smaller guard and the vision of a pure playmaker. In a comprehensive ranking published by ESPN experts in the early 2000s, Connie Hawkins was listed among the top 75 most talented players to ever grace the hardwood, a remarkable feat for someone who missed nearly a decade of professional competition. Historians of the game often point to his helicopter layups and his ability to control the ball with a single hand as the moment the sport transitioned from a ground-based game to a vertical spectacle. According to sports media reports from October of 2017, when Connie Hawkins finally concluded his journey at the age of 75, the basketball world stood still to honor the man who had essentially invented the modern highlight reel. These retrospective pieces highlighted a startling truth. The league didn't just lose 8 years of a player, it lost the evolution of the sport itself. But as we look back at the footage, a chilling question remains in the minds of many fans. If he could do all this with broken knees and a heavy heart, what kind of impossible feats would he have achieved if he had been allowed to play during his physical prime? As we reach the conclusion of this investigation into the life and times of Connie Hawkins, we are left with a story that is as much about the failure of an institution as it is about the triumph of an individual. The legacy of the Hawk is now firmly cemented in the rafters of the arena in Phoenix, where his journey finally found a home. In November of 1976, the Phoenix Suns organization took the extraordinary step of retiring his number 42 jersey, a gesture that signaled his permanent status as a cornerstone of their franchise. According to the team's official historical archives, this was one of the earliest jersey retirements in the history of the club, serving as a public declaration that the league's former outcast was now their greatest hero. When he passed away in 2017, current Commissioner Adam Silver released a formal statement praising Hawkins as a pioneer who had changed the game forever through his resilience and his undeniable talent. This statement was a long way from the blackball memos of 1961, proving that the truth eventually finds its way to the surface if one is willing to fight for it. However, the tragedy of the situation is still visible in the ledger of his career. He is the only Hall of Fame player to have his entire absolute peak occur away from the cameras of the major networks. According to investigative summaries of his life, the lost years of Connie Hawkins remain the greatest what-if in the history of professional sports, a cautionary tale about how easily a bureaucratic system can crush a human dream. He proved that you can take away a man's contract, his reputation, and his best years, but you can never truly take away his genius. As the lights go down on the story of the man they called the Hawk, we are left to wonder how many other legends are currently being silenced by the same forces that tried to bury him.